Buongiorno, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up Podcast. My name is Cameron McCulloch-Keeble, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm joined this week, as always, by Lewis. Hello.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Yes.
Dominantan. I think that's how you say, ladies and gentlemen. But I've no idea.
I know the one word, so.
I learnt it from a James Bond film years and years ago.
Didn't you learn German?
No, I did Spanish.
Ah. Impress me with your Spanish.
The only words really I remember from Spanish are bocadillo de queso, patatas fritas, and cerveza, which means cheese sandwich, chips, and a beer.
Sounds like all you need to know.
Exactly. Got the core stuff down. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been fun. Been a bit busy, but it's been good.
Excellent. Well, let's start off this week with the news. And the first piece of news this week is that the release date for Spider-Man has been confirmed for the PlayStation 4. It's coming out on September the 7th, and there was a big reveal this week because it was announced to be the cover of Game Informer. They kind of went hard on it in the week just gone. So there's a new traversal system. They're keeping the story stuff pretty secret, pretty low to the ground. Although the only thing that they have confirmed, for the most part, is that there's no microtransactions, and there is like a lot of pre-order costumes and gizmos and gadgets. And there's a physical fancy edition, which you don't get a lot of for console exclusives. So pretty cool.
Yeah, so they're releasing data like for the whole month, I think, on Game Informer. At the moment, the movement system looks really cool, and they've shown some extra stuff with it, but for the most part it's like an extra 30 seconds of footage of different sorts. So I'm interested to see if they show us some more actual stuff, because so far we've only been getting kind of little snippets. But maybe we'll probably see a lot more of it at E3, so that's not too troubling.
Yeah, you've got to imagine Sony are going to go hard on this one at E3. I've been heavily skeptical of this game. I'm still really quite skeptical of it, but I was a lot more skeptical before I heard September 7th. So, I mean, it's got to be there, right? Like 4 months out, it's got to be.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things is that they seem to be pretty hiding whatever the main kind of story of this game is. Like the pre-order bonus, the collector's edition comes with a statue that's not yet revealed and will be revealed in summer, and I assume by that they mean E3. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it comes with a statue.
So if you wanna double down and buy that probably highly expensive special edition that's not detailing what's in it, please feel free to waste your money on what could be porcelain crap.
Yeah. Well, at the moment they haven't revealed what the outfits are either, so currently you can buy it, but there isn't actually much revealed.
Kind of.
But yeah.
Kind of feel like there's a bit of a double standard going on here to some extent. I understand why they've done it, but like, I don't know, when Rocksteady announced the special fancy pass and editions for Batman and they didn't detail what was in it, people got rightfully shitty at them. But like Sony are doing it and like, oh my god, they're keeping everything. I just kind of feel like maybe they should have held off on this until they actually wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, that's fair. It's totally fair. Still excited for it though. Not pre-ordering it, but they have said that a lot of the stuff that's, I think, apart from the bonus missions that's on the pre-order, everything else is available in the game through earning it in some way.
Okay, that's cool.
So that's kind of cool. And apparently, there's like different outfits have different abilities, including like one that allows you to, I don't know, do like some electric attack with a guitar or something that I was talking about. Sounds a bit crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I think like there's lots of like hidden cool tricks that certain outfits will have. I'm still kind of thinking that there might be a Deadpool outfit, but
that would be cool. That'd be really cool.
I think it's likely. It's likely, but we'll see.
Licensing wise, that would be a mess because I think because Sony don't own the rights to Deadpool. I don't know who does. No, Fox owned the rights to the movies, but Fox weren't involved with the Deadpool game that came out from High Moon years ago. Tough one. Who knows?
Hard to say, but we'll see what they do. I mean, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm interested to see more details.
Game Informer tend to do a kind of structure of releasing a bit of information every few days for the month. So the likelihood is that by the end of this month, we'll know considerably more about Spider-Man than we did at the start of it. The question of how much we'll know in terms of like the actual game and what it will look like in September is a good question. But as you said, we've still got E3 fairly soon. So good stuff all around. Number 2, monetization is being removed from Shadow of War. It's being worded in a way that seems like Monolith has been maybe given some space by Warner Brothers, probably responding potentially to lackluster sales or profit from the microtransactions, is what you've put in the notes here, Lewis. I'm kind of in a 2 mindset about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel so. Firstly, I'm going to say if it's microtransaction profit, there's no way they take that out. If Warner Brothers saw microtransactions making profit, there would be no reason to take them out of a game.
That's what I'm saying. So not making the microtransaction
Oh,
profits,
I
though.
see. Sorry. No. Yeah. Okay. I lackluster sales or profit.
You know, like
so.
if it's there but no one's using it, then it's kind of.
Yeah, but I still don't feel like they take that out. Like, it doesn't cost them anything to have the content there in the game. At that point, it's like the sale of the game is the cost of entry. At that point, that's free money, I guess. I kind of feel like it's done to make the game more attractive, either to new buyers or to people who bought it and didn't like keep going with it. And I feel like it's almost like them holding their hands up and said, "Okay, we kind of shit the bed with this." But months and months after they've made money from it from the people who bought it in the first place. Like, if they're recognizing that they shit the bed with it, they should either say something and, like, make it clear the game's better or not include that shit in the first place.
Yeah, that's kind of why I think that it's probably that Monolith has been given space in some sense by Warner Brothers, because there's a big speech that they've written out, and they've written it in a way that makes it sound like it's, you know, they felt like the microtransactions were impeding on the player in some sense, but like it's kind of market speech or PR for like, we've been allowed to remove them, so now we're going to remove them.
Right.
That's kind of how it comes across, because I can't really think, as you say, of any other reason beyond for some reason they've been allowed to get away with it, or not get away with it, like remove them, and that's kind of the way it sounds.
I mean, good thing if you haven't picked the game up, like you're picking up a cleaner game than you had before, but
it's a good game.
No, it's a good game, but like if you weren't picking it up for microtransactions at this point, are you still that interested in picking it up? If you did pick it up and got fucked by the microtransactions, the damage is already done, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Like it improves a game that's well into its lifespan at this point.
Yeah.
Number 3, Valve is still apparently supporting Steam machines. They were delisted recently, but this was apparently done in error. Valve recognizes that Steam machines are not a huge seller, but they want to keep supporting them as a way to promote their own Linux environment. This is kind of fascinating when you pair it with the recent announcement that Valve is back developing games with the intention of publishing them. Valve has always been developing software, we can fairly safely assume, because behind the scenes they're always going to need software to test, they're always going to want to be working on those environments, and they are a company built of game developers among other things, but the kind of announcement that they're supporting their own hardware and re-upping their work publishing software, kind of interesting there. You can maybe read a couple of things into this.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it seems like Valve are trying to become more relevant in some senses. They had kind of lost a little bit of their relevancy in terms of keeping busy on production in some sense. Like it felt like we haven't really heard much from Valve in terms of being there since past few years. They've just kind of been supporting the store.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see them come to the fore a bit more and actually say that, yeah, we're not dead. We're still making things. We're still supporting our environments. Yeah, and like I think there is a time for Steam machines to come back, and I think we might be approaching that time with the costs of making a computer these days, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if maybe they might not try and do like a renewal of that soon.
I'm fully with you. I think there's actually, I think, a surprising amount of space now for Steam machines to have some success. I think they could be really good gateways into basic VR. They could actually make surprisingly good VR indie dev kits for people, and especially as we start to not look at a new console generation, because I personally think we're still a bit away from that. But as we start to sort of consider when that generation begins, generations of consoles are always odd because they're always like totally out of step with PC, because PC doesn't really have generations. So in the same way, there could be a sort of generational Steam machine transition, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that could definitely work well for them now, more than it did then.
Yeah, definitely. Number 4, Far Cry 5 is the second biggest Ubisoft launch ever, breaking the series' record. I believe this was in the UK. I don't know if this has been confirmed for the world. I know it was in the UK. Far Cry 5 is the second biggest Ubisoft launch ever. And frankly, well deserved, I would say. I'm about 15 hours into the game and fucking loving it. Absolutely stunningly good. It's going to be a talk about at the end of the year situation.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting, because I think it's got... I don't want to put it down at this point when you're like, yeah.
No, but I know exactly what you're about to say, is that a lot of sites were like 8.5s on it. They weren't like putting it in Game of the Year territory. And the thing is...
It wasn't that so much, actually. It's more that, like, tracking the user score. I think, like, in some senses, the game sours you by the end.
Oh, really?
So I think the general scores of the game started off really high and ended up getting lower over time. In a way that maybe suggests that people kind of like something towards the end of the game soured them. And I don't know what, because I haven't like read anything about it or like looked into it that much. But the scores are kind of interesting to look at.
So I think the game is going to be very hit and miss. I think we'll talk about it a bit more at some point down the line, I'm sure, because people are still probably getting into it at this point. But the game is structured in a way that it's not necessarily... It's not a story mode in the more traditional story sense. You really kind of have to find the story mode. The closest thing I can equate it to is a good few years ago now, there was a Need for Speed game where you weren't given like specific go to this story thing next. You were given the world and you found the next thing. And for me, that was a real turn-off at the time because there was like no structure to experiencing it. But in Far Cry 5, because I'm going in wanting a certain thing out of it already, that I'm sort of putting that structure in place. And so I think for the people that it misses, it's going to miss quite heavily because they go in wanting something more like Far Cry 4 or 3. But for me, because the story's hit in a way that I want to keep finding the next bit, it's like really dug its claws into me.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to it in chat when you kind of complete it, because I want to know if I should pick it up or not.
So, at 15 hours in, I'm going to say yes, absolutely. We'll pick back up in a bit. All right, number 6. Actually, number 5. Sorry, Far Cry... Balls that right up, didn't I? Number 5, Final Fantasy 15 has 4 new DLC announced last week, as well as a new ending proving that the game will just never, ever, ever die. Although, I've got to say, Square Enix have done a great job supporting this game, and it doesn't seem like they're going to stop anytime soon. The game sold fantastically. It was critically very successful. It seems to be a bit of a poster child for the Final Fantasy series at the minute. And good on Square for just giving it more. If people want more of it, give it to them.
Yeah, so this game released, I think, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And kind of since then, they've been releasing DLCs for it quite regularly. Yeah. As well as they recently, when you launched up the game, it asked you, like, what extra DLCs would you like us to add? What would you like us to kind of similar to what Ubisoft did a while ago with kind of locations and finding out where people were interested. They asked people what they were interested in terms of story DLCs, like what stories would they like to see, where would they like to go, and it seems like they're kind of just continuously expanding it. There is argument to say that one of the reasons why they're continuously expanding it is because initially the game was a little bit not empty, but like it was touch and go with the story in a kind of a way that's never really been done in any other game. Mm-hmm. If you imagine you've got like 10 chapters of story, then when you're playing the game, you get like chapter 2, Chapter 4, Chapter 6, Chapter 8, and Chapter 10.
Yeah.
In a way, it kind of misses out little bits of important key details, and the DLCs, in some sense, fill those in, which is a weird way to approach gaming, and I think hasn't netted them too much favor.
Am I right in saying that like a close approximation would be what happened with Metal Gear, where there was a story cobbled together of bits that were missing other core bits?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair way of putting it, and it seems like now they're kind of going back over that, but it does feel like the best version of the game to pick up will be the one that releases in 2020, and has all the content in it, which is, like in the same way that I bought it on PS4 near launch, and I think now you can get it on PC with all the DLCs included, than I got it then. Yeah. So that's kind of like,
yeah.
And then in a year's time, there'll be another version that has all these DLCs in. So I don't know.
It's one of these situations. It's clearly sort of striving towards the never-ending, always more content model. It's just they're somehow making people pay for it. So I've got to imagine that like 2K and Rockstar are like, how do we get to do that?
So I think like for my point of view, it should be like much more like a subscription service, and not a subscription like in that sense actually, but like you pay for the game, maybe you pay like 70 instead of 50 or something. But you get all the next updates for free, and then you try and actively get people more interested in it instead of trying to sell like an extra DLC every month, or every so often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially if, people down the line are able to buy all the DLC pack for the same price that you buy.
But look, hey, if you want to look at it in like a positive, good way,
yeah.
The way to think about it is this: in 4 years' time, that Game of the Year edition is going to be it's going to be 7 discs and absolutely incredible, and it'll still come out like way before the Final Fantasy VII remake. So
it's Final Fantasy 16 you got away about. That's coming up.
I'd actually love it if Final Fantasy 16 was just 7 remade.
Yeah.
All right, number 6, last year's highest rated RPG. I'm not calling it a computer RPG. That's ridiculous. RPG Divinity Original Sin has been announced for the PS4 and the Xbox One to be coming out in August 2018. This was like a hugely respected game last year. It was on lots of Game of the Year lists. You said earlier in the pre-show, Lewis, that like we were concerned about how it's going to translate to console because it's a very like PC specifically tooled game, and so we hope they've tooled it as well for console. But good games to people, yay.
Yeah. Just say computer RPG is a genre. Look it up, and you'll see what I mean by computer RPG. But yeah, like it's good to see, and it's good to see actually. This is a genre of games. There's not many game genres that don't leave PC, but this is one of the ones that usually never sees itself on a console. Or rarely sees itself on a console. Things like Diablo do come to consoles, but most of these never see the light of day on consoles. And so it's nice to see that gap being bridged. I think like it's something that's kind of come with the more recent consoles, that we're seeing some of the games that were stuck on PC do end up actually coming into consoles. So it's nice.
Yeah. There's those walls are being broken down to some extent, and I think that's a good thing. And I think as the consoles kind of open up more to stuff like mice and PC support, and as those publisher walls are broken down to some extent, it's going to get even better. So good. Number 7, the Borderlands leak from last week was confirmed to be fake. It was worked out when somebody took the image that somebody had leaked, pulled it off the background, and worked out that it was a very old piece of original Dark Souls 2 art. So unfortunately, no news there. Although in the same week, another leak dropped suggesting that Xbox this year has snapped up the marketing rights for Borderlands 3 and Cyberpunk. There's some up-in-the-air discussions about whether this is an E3 bollocks thing, or whether this is actually the case. Although Xbox have had the marketing rights for stuff from the makers of Cyberpunk before. They had Gwent, and they didn't have The Witcher before. Did they have Witcher as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I want to say they didn't have Witcher.
I think that they had E3 marketing rights, but PlayStation had marketing rights in the UK.
Right, okay.
I know that the posters on the tube were PS4.
Yeah, I was gonna because there was a specific PS4 made, wasn't there?
Well, maybe. Yeah. I have a friend
Anyway,
that buys all of the consoles, all the special editions. Uh,
um, either way, like massive, massive, massive pinches of salt with this one, but would be cool to see. Just anything Borderlands would be cool to see. I think people are getting to that point where they're really sort of hankering for it.
full of microtransactions, but I know we talked about it, but dubious.
It is worrying.
Yeah, so just on the plausibility thing, I think
Sure.
at the moment we're getting lots of rumors about E3 that are almost like I could probably post something and somebody would link it and say it's a confirmed rumor or confirmed rumor, but like I could you could go on to Reset Era now and just post like I don't know, Far Cry 6 is this year somehow, and like someone's going to link you and be like, yeah, this is confirmed. Because at the moment the rumor mill is a little bit too active. We're getting like another rumor every week that then ends up being like rejected the next week. Earlier on we confirmed also the Spyro Treasure Trilogy, which is not what it's called,
No.
as we will get onto. But yeah, like there's lots of too much rumors at the moment, but it's very plausible that Microsoft will have these on their show. Maybe not Borderlands 3, but we'll see. But I think Cyberpunk's probably quite likely to be there.
Yeah, I think Cyberpunk is one of those things that you can probably put good money on. Borderlands is less certain, but I think you can probably bet on it quite easily at this point, purely because like with that point in the cycle, I think it's the other stuff or how deep we go into those things that'll be the exciting part. And number 8, ladies and gentlemen, it happened. The Dragon is back. Spyro Reignited Trilogy was confirmed for release this year on September 21st. It's being made by a company called Toys for Bob, who previously made the Skylanders games. Interestingly, not being made by Vicarious Visions, which has made people question what they might be working on. There's questions about whether they are in fact making a new Crash Bandicoot game, although there's also questions about whether they have been confirmed for the Xbox port of Crash Bandicoot until that game's out. We're not sure on that. We'll see a bit later in the year, specifically when Crash comes out. But yeah, Spyro's back. It's all 3 games. It's totally remastered from the ground up. I want to say it's remade from the ground up.
Yeah, remade.
Totally remade from the ground up for all the consoles. Interestingly, the only console that isn't confirmed at the minute is Nintendo Switch, but there is a page for the game on the official UK Nintendo website. So it seems a fairly good bet that it's coming to the Switch. It's just a matter of when and how it gets announced.
Yeah, it seems likely that the situation here is that it's actually the PC's not got a release, and I'm thinking that the reason for that is that the PS4 and the Xbox basically have one release because they're kind of similar in terms of architecture.
Yeah.
But I think they're almost identical in architecture, but so it's not like a difficulty to make the game work for both of them. But then in terms of having Spyro like have a high end for the PC, if they do launch it on PC, that's going to take extra work, and the Switch has to have a low end because it's weaker than the other consoles. And like actually looking at the trailer, I think this game looks a lot higher definition than Crash. Or not higher definition, but higher. If you look at the stuff that was released for it, it looks a lot more like graphically intense than the Crash Bandicoot remake. And so I'm thinking that maybe it's not as easy to move it to the Switch.
Yeah, I think it probably will come out on Switch, mainly because I think Switch is kind of a perfect platform for it. They really they built the Switch's release up on the promise of platformers to some extent in terms of like Super Mario Odyssey and Mario Kart and not Zelda, but to some extent Zelda. And so I think it will come out on the Switch. It's just a question of what does it look like and who's developing it, because Toys for Bob is probably working on the 2 main versions of it. So who's handling that port? I've also got to imagine they don't want to murder the Crash marketing. Crash has had a big push on the Switch. Like it's the Nintendo Switch version of Crash is the one that's playable at PAX, for example. And it's the first time that Crash, I believe, has been on a Nintendo console. So I wonder if they want to kind of let that release and then follow up later with Spyro, almost use that momentum. But Crash has been on Xbox before, so it's maybe a more natural selling point rather than a more natural console for it. But Spyro was always going to be more intensive. Crash is a series of fairly linear levels. There's some like shortcuts and pathways you can do, but Spyro is like semi-open world. It's very sandboxy. And the way you choose to interact with the game is a lot more open than Crash. So yeah, it is going to be a more intense game, and there does seem to be a more kind of fancy graphics approach to this one. Crash was made kind of to look like a Saturday morning cartoon in a way, but as a result, I've got to imagine that there's some like ways that they hid some of the work they did there. I feel like it's a little more on show in Spyro because of it being that open nature.
Yeah, and I think like there's a lot of little things that were clear in the trailer that someone like myself who spends a lot of time looking at kind of graphics and game, not design, but game like graphical parts in games that you know are intensive. There's things in there like the fire effects that Spyro has, and the like stuff that you don't really realize when you're playing games, but things like the grass looks really quite complicated. So like I think there's a lot in there that's actually going to make it look really quite good, and it looks really good from looking at the trailers. So I'm quite hyped for getting it. I'm quite excited to get it. Because I mean, you get 3 games, for one price, and it's remastered, and it looks beautiful, and you've got memories. It's pretty hyped.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. I really like that they seem to have done it with a lot of respect. Activision have not been the nicest to Spyro in the past. They've kind of used Spyro as like a jumping off for launching other franchises or other payment models and so on and so forth. And this genuinely seems to have been treated in the same way that Crash does, in that, they've taken the time to really capture the feeling, it looks like, of the original games, and I think that's a very special thing. And that actually leads us quite nicely into our topic of the week this week. Spyro for me is important for a number of reasons, and we'll get onto why in a second. So we wanted to talk very briefly, or not very briefly, maybe we'll go deep on it, about games that mean more to us than just video games. Games that maybe have a tie to something else. Do you want to talk to this, or shall I take the lead?
Okay, no, I'll talk.
Cool.
Yeah, so for me, I have lots of memories with video games and lots of things that are kind of, I think something like Crash Bandicoot really reminds me of playing with my like grandparents watching. And I think like that, like when I was playing through Crash Bandicoot recently, it really kind of brought back memories of that kind of times. So yeah, like I think talking about games that really remind you of those times is what we're talking about here. And though Crash had that for me, and while I love playing that game, it just always makes me feel really young,
Mm. Yeah, I specifically put this topic in this week because I kind of wanted to tell a bit of a story with it. I don't talk about this stuff a lot, and I probably won't do. I've kept it fairly quiet. But a couple of years ago, I lost my father, and Spyro has always meant a lot to me from a family thing. Years and years and years ago, I borrowed Spyro 3 from a friend, and I never got to complete it. So we went on a family holiday, and I got some spending money on the family holiday. And I thought, oh, okay, this I'm gonna buy myself a game because games are expensive and kids are dumb. So, so I bought Spyro 3, like I bought my own version. And we got back to where we were staying, and I opened the case and started reading through the manuals because like it was still a week until we went home. So the closest thing I was going to do to play this game was look at it and read the book on it. Back when games came with books, and my father came over and handed me the first 2 games, and it turned out that whilst I'd been in the game store in the Waverley Centre in Edinburgh, I'd picked up the first one, and he'd gone up and picked the other 2 alongside it, and he'd bought them and handed it off. So it's gonna be a really nice thing come September to see what those games look like now in their maturity and how beautiful they kind of have become. But yeah, Spyro means more to me than just like a dumb purple dragon video game character. Like it's kind of it's something. If I said to like my family, "Oh, Spyro means family to me," they'd probably be like, "Okay, well, I don't think that's what like that would. It would be clear why that is." But yeah, Spyro is one of those ones that reminds me of my childhood, and will be like a constant touchstone for those sort of younger moments that really make you think of your family. So I'm very excited to get it back for that reason.
It's a very good reason, and I hope it lives up to kind of the nostalgia you have for those games, but also just kind of brings you back.
Yeah, and like, I'm quite excited to get Crash as well. Crash reminds me of family as well, but for like different reasons. My sister always loved. There's the level where you play Coco riding the tiger in Crash 3, and like being able to play that with her again is going to be great fun. So yeah. It's like, it's weird because a lot of people have been bagging on like these 90s remake games, and we've bagged on them a bit because like remakes have become a bit of a tired thing in the industry. But remakes are weird because they're tired for everyone except like the 10% of people that want them really badly, and we're the people who want the 90s ones really badly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think from my point of view, switching on to my next kind of game series, is that when I was young, I used to sit down and watch my mum play Tomb Raider.
Oh, cool.
The Tomb Raider games, especially like 1, 2, 3, and 4. And a while ago, they remade Tomb Raider 1. A long time ago. I think it's Tomb Raider Anniversary is what they called it. And it was essentially the original game, but built up as if it was a game made in I don't know when it was released, but 2010. As opposed to being kind of the very janky PS1 era game. It was remade and kind of made into a much bigger game, but still when you played it, you got that feeling of nostalgia. And when I played through it, it just reminded me of watching my mum play those games back when I was younger, which is one of the reasons why I was kind of excited about the Tomb Raider remake we're not getting, remaster we're not getting. I do kind of hope that they go back and maybe look at remaking Tomb Raider 2 and 3 in that, but I appreciate that it's probably not going to happen now.
Certainly not from that developer who didn't ask anyone about making it.
But yeah, there isn't much for me because my apart from that, my mum didn't really play anything, and my dad buys games but doesn't play them. He has an Xbox One for no reason at all. But yeah, like I think like we're all kind of 90s, we're 90s kids, and we kind of 90s kids, are we?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're a little bit iffy on that one, but we're
like on the cusp of 90s kids and terrible Gen X millennials. Like we're somewhere in between.
Without avocados. But yeah, so yeah, so I actually am a big fan of the remaster thing, but I kind of want them to remake certain games. Like if Konami announced that they're releasing a Metal Gear Solid remaster, then like I'm going to be really excited about that. Even though like the whole thing with Konami.
It would be. I'd love to watch that because it would be such a bittersweet moment of, oh my god, it's Metal Gear, and oh my god, it's Konami.
Yeah.
It's, to me, it's weird because I think like it's just as we've said, when they announce like a remake of, like, there's been loads of rumors the past couple of weeks about a Modern Warfare 2 remake, except that there'd be no multiplayer, it would just be the single player. And a lot of people have been quite passionate and vocal about it online because it's like, oh, you can't separate these bits. And I never played that game, and so to me there's like a real disjoint between, okay, it's another remaster, and then they announce like Red Faction and Spyro, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And it must be odd for the other people who are like, dude, it's a purple dragon, calm down. But one of my favourite moments of anything tied to a remaster is 3 years ago, nearly 3 years ago, sat in my shitty student flat when they announced the Final Fantasy remaster. I have never seen you so honest to God, Buzzy, you could have floated at the time. We always do our reaction podcasts afterwards. Mostly we're looking at how we do that this year, but we always do them afterwards. But like I wish we'd done reactions at the time, because there was a real like me and Loz were sat watching the conference. We were like, oh, this is a pretty good conference. And you were like on your feet, jumping about, walking around the kitchen. It was magical.
No, totally. I remember it well. And I think it's worth putting it into the context of like, not only am I not really usually that animated, I was also like super cynical that year. I was really cynical. I think if you went back and listened to like the things that we put out, it was like, well, that was awful, wasn't it? For everyone. And then
that was the year. Sorry to jump in. That was like one of the first years where Xbox was really struggling. Although that was the backwards compatibility year, so that was their good year. But it was like the year before the Switch, so everything Nintendo did was odd. It was the first year where Ubi was really pressed by.
Well, Ubi didn't really have anything, because they had their great years where Ubi was on top, and then it was like all of our games were actually not that good.
But also, it was one of the first years where they were really pressed by the guys who were coming in to take their shares. So you could really see them trying to push everything as like this. Like, everything was big scale and everything was amazing. But, like, that was the year they had everyone dancing to Just Dance, and then it turned out to be, like, a mobile game. And there was this really weird disjoint between, like, everything was a huge scale but genuinely unimpressive. And then Sony just fucking exploded.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, the Final Fantasy thing was big for me, and it's probably my favorite game of all time in some ways. It's kind of hard now because you put it into the context of like.
I was going to say, and thank God it came out to be a perfect 10.
Yeah, it's like putting it into context of like this kind of janky game from that era compared to now, but. I'm very excited for the remaster, and I actually still watch the trailer every now and then. That's how bad it is. Like how I'm still kind of animated. Like I literally watch the trailer and get all goosebumps. That's how bad it is. But no, you're right. And like I was so cynical that year, and I was suddenly very animated and jumpy over something at like 2 a.m. or something.
Yeah. But it's nice, I think, to have those, either those like moments in gaming or those games that bring something totally different out of you. And like you say, you watch the trailer and get goosebumps, and I think more and more of the people our age are going to be having that, because you can see the industry kind of working through eras of remakes. Like a couple of years ago, you got a lot of the remakes for stuff like some of the original LucasArts games and some of the original Double Fine games. And now you can see like the 90s platform as being the focus, and it's going to be kind of interesting. Like there's a slowly rising trend of people making games that deliberately look like PS1 games, because like there's now a nostalgia for that, because we're getting to that point where we have enough disposable income to throw it at games with little consideration. And I think it's kind of nice that our generation is getting that point where like we're playing games as much from a I remember when it was like this, for a oh my god, Far Cry 5 is amazing.
Yeah, totally. And you know, I'm very hyped for where we're going in gaming at the moment. I think we can talk about it more some other time, but there's a bit of a disjoint. There's very much a fracturing of gamers at the moment, in terms of like people who are really happy with where we're going, and people who aren't as happy with where we're going. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm really excited for where gaming is at the moment myself.
Yeah, I agree. And like the industry has some massive imperfections, just like any industry, and specifically just like any entertainment industry. But I think there's very few things. It's just nice to have like to be able to sit down and have like emotions tied to a computer generated purple dragon or a bandicoot that looks nothing like a bandicoot, you know?
Yeah, totally. And all the more for those moments.
Yeah, exactly. And may we make many more of them to come. If you have a game that's tied to a specific memory or that you're super excited for these reasons, we would absolutely love to hear about it. This was a kind of different personal episode for me especially, but I'm sure yourself as well. We tend to talk more about like the industry and the business and the this, that, and the politics of it to some extent. This was slightly different. Next week's going to be slightly different as well, and I'm going to surprise you with the topic then. So yeah.
Cool.
So we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love your support as well. If you feel like showing us your support, you can find us at Games Upcast on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And I think if you search that in iTunes, it comes up as well. But if you're on iTunes, you hopefully already listening to this, so never mind. We publish on Monday at 6:30 and much earlier that day on iTunes. You can catch it on your way to work. And if you feel like liking it on Facebook, sharing it, supporting it, subscribing to it, that'd be lovely, because it gets us out in front of a few more people, and that genuinely means a lot to us. Thank you very much for joining me, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure. Have a lovely week, and we will see you next time. Until then, the game's up.